I'm going to briefly go over the upcoming project, which you can get to from schedule and assignments and then go into project descriptions. And it is the first one here, project title, color, movement in generative media. There's an awful lot here for you to look through, and I'm going to leave that up to you to go through on your own time. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see a list of artists that I would like you to look up and to use as inspiration for your animation here. The reason I picked these artists is because they all are making artwork that looks like something you could try to recreate and then animate in processing. If you have another artist in mind, feel free to reach out to me. So these are all the different steps for you to look over, but what I wanted to address right now was the different styles. So you're going to make two different pieces, and I want them to be done in very different styles. So I want to go over what I mean by the two distinct styles. Here I say develop two distinct sketches inspired by the chosen artist. You're going to be using random in them, but I want them to have different looks. So in processing, and I'll show you some past student examples, this is kind of what we've been doing right now. So we have our background and our setup, and I have a stroke color, and I have a line that's going to start in the middle, and it's going to randomly move on the X and the Y. So if I play this, we see the movement, but what's going to happen is it's going to very quickly fill in and become a solid shape, and we won't see the animation anymore. So we know that one solution could be, instead of having this as solid color, we could make this something random. My mouse on this computer is not very good. It takes forever to do anything. So, okay, I could put a random of maybe 150 to 250, and now it doesn't fill in completely because it's not all the exact same color. So that is one solution. So what we're looking for, like different ways to do things, but also we always want our animation to look continuous. We also know that we could slow down the frame rate, and that is another way that I could get a different look here, and also kind of elongate my animation. That's another thing I could do. Another thing I could do, instead of putting the random, if you don't like that look, I'll switch this back, if this mouse will behave, to my solid white color, but I could add opacity in instead. So that will eventually, but it'll take a very long time, it'll eventually become a white blob, but that takes a much longer time. So that's another option of how you can kind of elongate things and get a different kind of look than if we had just a solid color. So in this case, I might want to increase my frame rate a little bit. Also, let's see what this looks like if I had a stroke weight of 1 instead of 5. And I will increase my frame rate. Okay, so now this will take a little bit of time to fill in, but it kind of almost gives this glow-like effect to it. So what's key here is having the lower opacity on my stroke, so that way the lines are filling in at a low opacity, but as they overlap each other, they are getting an increased opacity, and they're starting to give like a more solid white color. All right, the next thing that I wanted to go over, which is kind of a new idea, would be if I have something kind of in between. So we've seen if we put the background in the draw, I'm going to get just a single line at a time. If I have a low opacity on that, we can barely see it. So if my background is in the draw, I get the kind of laser light show effect. So I'm going to put my background back. And here's another option that we could do, and I'm also going to put the opacity of this back to be just pure white. Okay, so let's just play this and see where we are right now. So here we have the white lines, but they're going to fill in. So another thing I could do is I could make a box that covers my entire background, and I could give it the same color as my background, but with a low opacity. And this is creating kind of an in-between, which is a fade. So it's similar to the effect that you would get with just putting an opacity on the stroke for my line, but this will apply to every single shape. So I'm going to start off with putting in a fill that is the same color as my background, but giving it a low opacity. I'll start with 10. And then I am going to put in a rectangle here, just in case I want to eventually change the size of my sketch. And I'm going to put it starting at the top corner, so 0, 0. And this is a system variable. So this is something that processing understands. If I write width, it's going to automatically look at the width of my side that I have in my size. And if I write height, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to look at whatever number I have here. So this is what I call the fading rectangle. We'll reference this quite a few times throughout the semester, and what this is going to give me is that kind of fade. So I see things there, but eventually they are kind of fading behind as this rectangle that is covering my entire screen here repeats and puts itself on top of each other with this really low opacity. So what you could do is you can try adjusting that to different levels and seeing the different kinds of effects that you get. So the higher it is, the more it looks kind of like the laser light show. The lower the opacity is on this rectangle, the longer the image stays, but it will eventually, the background ones kind of fade away. So you can get this in between. So again, the reason to do this as a single fading rectangle instead of just the opacity on my line, which I could do, but this would now apply to every single shape that I have down below it in the draw. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. Well, also just to point out, the reason I did the width and the height was so now if I end up changing the size of this, which you might end up doing, you might want to scale it or change it so you could put this piece in your portfolio. This will always adjust, so this rectangle will still cover the entire background because it's looking at the width and it's looking at the height. So that's kind of cool. It saves you a little bit of time of not having to go and change that. And in fact, if I really wanted to get that line always to be in the middle, I could use width divided by 2. And so now instead of having to rewrite my size to be in the middle when I change the size of my canvas, and I can do the same thing for the height, that's always going to be in the middle. Oops, except for I should divide it by 2. Okay. And I could do, so if you look at my PowerPoint, I go over system variables, and the first ones we use a lot are width and height. Now let's look at some past student examples. So this is using the kind of method that you should be more familiar with, where you're putting the background in the draw, so it's erasing the trail. So we're just getting like this little moving face here, and here some lines are filling in, but with very low opacity. So this is based off of one of the artists in the project description. Here's another kind of example where we have the moving stars and a little bit of this like moving character here. There's a Picasso moving. So, you know, approach this, think about what are the unique characteristics to each artist. What if they had an opportunity to animate their own pieces, what do you think that they would do? So here's some other ones that paint in. So this is what I call like the continuous movement example, right? So all of these is continuous movement, meaning the background is in the draw and it's just moving continuously. It's not leaving a trail. But now we'll look at some other examples doing a different thing where they are leaving a trail, they're painting in. So here's this piece already quite a bit done. I'm going to refresh it so you can see how it starts out. As it starts out, we just have a lot of squares. We're not quite sure what it is. And then as it fills in, eventually we're going to see it's 4 people standing here. What I like about this one is, you know, there's a nice difference in size of the shapes that are being used to fill in the figures. There's a little bit of random on the color, so even when they completely fill in, we're going to continue to see the animation. It's a little larger than can fit on my screen. I'll scroll it down, but you can see there's some feet there as well. Okay, so I like that it takes a little bit of time. We are going to be setting these to music, and I want them all to be around a minute long. So that's your kind of thinking about. So one of your pieces might just have that continuous movement like this, but then the other one should have something where it's painting in. the animation is painting in to give us the final image, and your goal should be to try to get it to be at least like a minute long. That might be hard depending on your piece, but as a goal. So we can come back to that one. So let's look at this one when it first starts out. If as you see, it's like really quite dark and it's slowly fading in, but let's see what it looks like when it first starts out. It's like completely black, and then very slowly it starts to fill in the painting. So this takes quite a bit of a while, but so you can see that they're using opacity. So in these examples, the background would be in the setup, and so that allows the trail to stay and the image to be painted in slowly over time. I'll just jump to some other examples here. So this is going on its way. This is how it looks as it starts out, and it slowly paints in. And if we keep going, we would see that these eventually become solid looking shapes, but because there's a little bit of random on the color, we can continue to see the animation. Here's another example of kind of mixing, right? So here we're not leaving a trail, and here you are leaving a trail. And the same thing over here. So we have some parts that are not leaving a trail and parts that are leaving a trail. So let me refresh this one so you can see like the green paints in, and what's going on up here paints in, this yellow paints in. When I say paint in, I mean like it's just leaving a trail, but the lines here do not leave a trail. So how can you combine the two? Well, just like we did with the fading rectangle to create a fade, if you have a shape that is underneath that is a solid color, that's actually going to act like a background. So every time it loops through here, or any one of these triangle shapes, it's putting the solid color that's behind it, and it erases the trail. So that's a way that you could try to combine the two. Is I think in this one here, because we're seeing a little bit of a trail, I think just the solid colors that are behind here are preventing the trail, but this has the background in the setup, so it's allowing the section up here, because it doesn't have any colors behind it, this blue is just the background in the setup, to leave the trail. So that's kind of an interesting thing to try to combine in a single sketch, parts that where there's no trail and parts that are leaving a trail. And so this is the way this one looks after it's been playing for quite a bit of time. The other kind of method I talk about is the idea of using negative space. So that would be where the piece starts out and we don't really know what we're seeing, but there actually are shapes here. They're just the same color as the background, so that's the negative space. And as the positive space fills in, we start to see the negative space revealed. So that again is happening because there are shapes here already. There are just some rectangles here forming the outlines. We can come back to that one. Same thing is happening here. So this is the way it looks after it's been running for a while. Up here are some dark blue. It's probably hard to see, but some lines here. And this will eventually fill in and get quite bright. But when it starts out, we barely see anything. And it's just the black lines, the rectangles were there already. So maybe, trying to reverse it, thinking about negative space. I think this was based off of an image that is reversed. I'm not sure exactly what it looked like originally, but maybe it did have black lines and then it's just on a white background. So painting in the background is kind of the reversal. You're painting in the background versus painting in like the actual foreground parts of the painting. All right, so start thinking about it. Look over all of those artists. Look over the whole project description. Start researching. Just look these guys up. You are looking to do 2 different random animations. They all need to have random in color and in movement as well. And you are looking to have 2 different styles. So if you have one that's maybe very minimalist like this, where it's just like little bits of movement, aim for your other one to be something kind of more like where it's painting in. All right, let me know if you have any questions.